when we set up a tank, something goes wrong, no matter if you're experienced or you're brand new, bad things happen with tanks or things crop up where you haven't got exactly what you need. And those things can be life threatening to your fish and really damaging to your tank if you're not prepared for it. So these are my things from my experience, what I think is most beneficial to get. Make sure you've got stocked to make sure that you don't run into any instances where you've not got exactly what you need when shit really hits the fan. So one of the first things you want to consider if you're setting up a tank, especially African cichlids, is that you've got a good supply of tap safe. So my advice with this is it's a clear and obvious one, but that's not where the advice comes in. So don't buy them in little bottles. A lot of people get little bottles, and I guarantee you now, because I've done it in the past, you'll pick up these little bottles because they're a little bit cheaper, and you run out and you'll be in a situation where you end up having to do a water change and you can't treat it with tap safe. So my advice for that is always stock up, get a bulk jug of tap safe, make sure that you're prepared, because with African cichlids we do a lot of water changes, and the last thing you want to do is have to do a water change, you run out of tap safe, and then your fish are sat in tap water for 2-3 days before you can get to the shop and get some more. So buy tap safe in bulk. That's the first thing, the first preparation I think you should make. Next is in relation to your heaters. So when you're looking at a heater, don't look for the cheapest piece of crap that you can find on eBay that you can just stick in your tank that's going to give you a really low budget, because that's going to cause you problems. What you want to do is invest in something from a fish shop that potentially has a bit of a guarantee on it. These cheap sort of Chinese little things you get on eBay, they have the place in the hobby and they're very good to buy, and I'll come to that shortly. But the heater is the life support of your tank, and if that fails, especially if you live in a cold climate, that can be really detrimental to the health of your fish. So invest in a half decent heater, because even the really good ones I've had and they've failed on me. Secondly, you always want to make sure that you've got a spare one. So they've failed that frequently on me. I always make sure that I've got a spare heater in the house that I can just replace it with straight away. So that's where you sort of cheaper Chinese ones that you get on eBay and things like that, that's where they come into play. So you can purchase one of those as a backup heater. You know, you can spend little money on it, but it still gives you that security, and it gives you an emergency plan in case your main heater fails. You can swap it over and then you can go and get yourself another decent one. A lot of these decent ones, you'll get guarantees on them as well. So definitely worth investing in decent heating equipment before you get into this. Another big one, and this is a really big one, this is a really big pet peeve of mine, and that is when you're going to start a tank, make sure that you've got water test kits. So why you wouldn't prepare yourself and have all these water test kits ready for when you set up a tank is beyond me, because it's vital for the fish's health. You don't get the best coloration, the best growth rates, the best activity from your fish if you don't keep your water parameters correct. So the main ones you want to get when you're starting a tank, or when you've got an ongoing tank that you want to be measuring, are your ammonia for when you're cycling and your nitrite tests. You want to get your nitrate tests for when your cycle's complete, and you want to start testing when that gets to a dangerous level, which will indicate when you need to do a water change. And then you also want to get some pH kits, because you want to test the pH, especially with African cichlids, because they need a higher pH level. And then another good one, which isn't a necessity, but it's a good one to get if you're getting African cichlids, is your general and carbonate hardness tests. These fish like hard water. They come from that region of the world. The hard water makes a difference to the health and the biology and how things function. So make sure you've got water tests and make sure you're testing your water, because that's where things can go horribly wrong if you're not doing it. Maintenance equipment. Always make sure you've got maintenance equipment. So hoses. Oh, Jesus. Pumps or siphons that are going to get the water out your tank. Buckets are always handy when it comes to cleaning media in your tank. When you're getting new fish and you don't want to put the fish store's water into your tank, you can empty it into your bucket and get your fish in. And then towels. You can never have enough towels with this. When you're doing water changes or you're messing around with canister filters, always have a towel, get your own. You don't want to be using your missus's towels.
We are fucking over, you fucking dumbass!
So get something that you can use primarily for your fish tank. Really important stuff to get. Maintenance bits and bobs. Glass cleaners as well. So I like to use the blades. So I think anything with a blade on it works better. You already know my stance on magnetic cleaners. They're absolutely crap. So get a decent sponge or a decent sort of blade that you can get your hands into the tank and give it a good scrub. And then you can make sure that everything's nice, maintained. You've got a clean finish on everything then as well. Another huge one is your filtration. So what you've got in your sump or what you've got in your canister filter. These fish produce a massive bioload. We also tend to stock them a lot more heavily. So we crowd the tanks, whether it be in booners, peacocks or haps. It helps with the aggression when we crowd the tank. So we have a massive bioload. It's important to prepare for that. So whether you're thinking of using sort of alpha grog, you just need to fill your canister or your sump with decent biological filtration. So sponges, bio balls, ceramic media, alpha grog. Even if you've got a sump moving bed filters, it's vital that you overcompensate instead of just getting enough or not getting quite the right amount. You don't want to be adding this to your tank later and waiting for it to cycle and get that growth of bacteria on it when your tank's already overcrowded and your filter's not doing the job you need it to do. So always overcompensate before you set up your tank, get it all ready and set up. Still on the subject of filtration, similar to what we said about the heaters, you want to make sure that you're getting some quality. So invest in a canister filter or invest in return pumps for your sump that are reliable, they're well renowned. Spend a little bit more money, because if you're going to buy something that's crap for the sake of, 40, 50, 60 quid, then you're going to get a higher chance of failure on that piece of equipment. Get something that's going to have a guarantee on it. Get something that's got good reviews. Get something that you see a lot of people using that they don't have any issues with. It's worth it further down the line, because if you have these pieces of equipment fail on you, then, it's not just about saving that extra 50 quid on the actual canister filter or the equipment itself. You could have hundreds of pounds worth of livestock in your tank, and that saving yourself that little bit of money just to get something a little bit quicker and get your tanks up a little bit quicker can be detrimental and ruin things for you further down the line. So I'll say it again, always invest in decent equipment for your tanks that are going to be reliable. Nets. Always make sure you've got a net to hand. Don't make the mistake I did. I always end up getting tanks and forgetting to get nets in place. Another mistake that you want to avoid is make sure you're getting a net relevant to the size of your tank. Trying to catch fish in this tank, I might as well be trying to lasso them. So it's near impossible for me to catch a live fish in this net from this tank. So if you're getting one, ideally you want to try and cover the width of the net similar to the width of your tank from front to back. So it gives the fish less ways out and less chance of it escaping when you're trying to catch it and get it out. Another important one, what you're going to want to have in place if you're keeping African cichlids, which has been vital to me over the years of keeping them, is some sort of spare tank or a holding facility for fish. So I've got the luxury of having the reservoir, which I've used quite often when I've needed to separate fish from the tank. So there's loads of situations, especially with African cichlids, where you might need to take a fish out. One, if it's ill, so if you've got a sick fish and there's a risk of it infecting your other fish in the tank, you want to get that out of the tank as soon as possible and treat it separately. Another one is if your fish are holding and you want to keep the fry alive, you need to take them out of the tank. So I had a similar situation with that a few weeks ago where I've had a females get into the tank which I've not known about, and I've had to separate them in order for the fry to live, because otherwise the haps would eat it. And then another situation you could run into, or which you most likely will run into with these fish, is aggression. So you might get one of those fish that's just blood drunk, a murderer. I've had plenty of them in the past where you always get that one, and it's usually the ugly fish that it'll put it in your tank and it'll just start battering and trying to kill everything in there. You need to separate those fish as soon as possible. So having spare tanks, I mean, I've got the little nano cube over here for the haps. When I've had a fish delivery, the fish haven't been big enough to go into the main display. But luckily, I've had this nano cube spare where I could set it up, and it gives these fish some sort of life support. I can keep them alive. But if you haven't got the luxury or space of having a spare tank lying around, one thing you can get are these mesh breeder boxes which you can put into the tank. So they're perfect for emergency situations where you need to separate maybe a fish that's holding, or if you need to separate a really naughty fish which is doing some serious damage in your tank. You can use one of these mesh boxes and keep them in your main system, but it avoids you having any carnage or any deaths in the tank as well. So that's my list of useful preps to make when you're setting up an African cichlid tank. Trust me, if you follow everything on that list, if you're just beginning and you're just starting and thinking of setting one of these up, you'll be very grateful further down the line if you have these things in place, especially things like reliable equipment. It's so important to have reliable equipment. I've done it. I've tried buying the cheaper stuff to save money. They do fail, so I have a lot of experience in things that have failed on me. And then the tap safe's another big one as well. So with African cichlids, we do a lot of water changes. We have to keep the water quality good. So you'd be very surprised when you're buying these small bottles how quickly that runs out. We typically have larger systems as well, so they need larger doses of tap safe. But they're all my things to prepare for. Follow the rules on the list. You should have some good success if you have all those things in place. If you found this useful, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and then we'll be back with more videos soon.